So before I get started on this video, I think I need to explain a few things. First off, I think idolizing celebrities is a little bit weird. You don't know them, you only know the persona that they give out to the world. So if you think you know a celebrity, you don't. All of that's to say that I'm not doing this video because I'm a massive Taylor Swift fanboy and I think she can do no wrong because I know her better than anyone else. That's not what's happening here at all. I think that's a bit silly. Full disclosure, I do think she's one of the best artists of her generation. I like pretty much every album she's put out. I think she's good at what she does. She makes good music. That's not to say that I think you can make music and not be a terrible person. Look at John Lennon. I'm fully aware that you can make amazing music and still be a total ass. And you know, I'll happily admit whenever any creative person that I like has done horrible things. I don't think that's really the case with Taylor Swift though. From what I knew of the things that she'd done publicly, it didn't really match with the reaction that she got. Do you remember that time that she interpolated a song and people went nuts saying, oh, you've plagiarized this, but it turns out that she'd actually credited the artist. It was Right Said Fred, they were getting money for it anyway. I don't know why people are kind of like, you know, against her from the get-go. So I decided to have a bit of a look into it to see what was actually going on, if there was a reason to hate Taylor Swift. And it actually turns out that it all comes back to one thing. Today I present to you my 5-part analysis on why people hate Taylor Swift. Part 1. Sexism. So Taylor Swift has been around for just over 10 years now, and if you look way back to when she was starting out, there was always the same joke that followed her around, and it followed her around for quite a few years actually. It was, Taylor Swift has too many boyfriends. Look how many guys she's dated. Isn't that funny? Isn't it bad for a woman to see so many men? What a terrible person she is for dating boys, I guess. So if you don't remember, that was a standard joke that just followed her around. Anyone could make that joke. Everyone made that joke. Even if you called yourself a feminist, you could still make this obviously sexist joke. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler made that joke in an award ceremony. It was something that everyone did. I've already said this, but if you actually look at it, there is nothing to that joke other than just sexism. A woman dating lots of men is bad or funny. And that was the reason that a lot of people hated Taylor Swift for a long time. She would date a boy, she would break up with the boy, she would write a song about the boy. That was the reason that you disliked Taylor Swift. It was just sexism. Originally, you could just dislike her because of sexism. That kind of leads into my next point, with people kind of being mad about her making a lot of songs about her exes. There was this whole thing about her writing songs about exes and that being rude or mean, but if you're a musician and you write songs about emotional times in your life, you're gonna write songs about exes. I mean, lots of people write breakup songs. People just got focused on this one girl who was really popular and making breakup songs. It was really weird, to be honest. I don't know why the focus was on her more so than anyone else. If you're dating someone that writes music, you could probably assume that at some point they're gonna write some music about you. And I don't really think you could be too mad about that unless you have an explicit sort of agreement with them of never writing anything about each other. I guess if you go that agreement, it's fair, but I never heard of anyone saying that they had that agreement with her. So a lot of these things were going to be off the top of my head, but in the interest of fairness and the fact that I've got very little interest whatsoever in celebrity drama, I decided to go ahead and read a few comprehensive articles on all the things I'm going to be talking about. Surprising that those exist. Didn't know that you can have a timeline of every single thing a celebrity's done. Weird that those exist, but to each their own, I guess. So Camilla Bell, this is not a story about the world being sexist to Taylor Swift initially, but in fact a story about Taylor Swift being sexist herself. Scandalous. I know. So Camilla Bell was dating a Jonas brother. I think it was Nick. It could be Joe. It wasn't Kevin. Directly after Taylor Swift dated that Jonas brother. Said Jonas brother broke up with Taylor Swift over a phone call that lasted like 26 seconds. And then he went away and started dating Camilla Bell straight away. So in 2010, Taylor Swift released a song called Better Than Revenge, which was about a woman taking another person's boyfriend. People said it was about Camilla Bell, and it makes sense that it would be about Camilla Bell. But in that song, there is a particular little bit that is, it's not very good. What it says is, she's not a saint, and she's not what you think. She's an actress, but she's better known for the things that she does on the mattress. Not very good. That's a bad move, Taylor. That was not great. A little bit of shaming right there. That's unequivocally sexist, and outside of that, it's just mean and rude. I'm not here to defend that, but what I will say is that it seems weird to hang on to that one thing after 10 years have passed. Especially when it was probably written when she was a teenager. You see the same kind of thing happen to Hayley Williams, who wrote a lyric that was a bit shamey, and people have been harping on for years, even though she wrote it as a teenager, and that's not what she's like now. There's not much point in hanging on to something if it doesn't reflect who they are now at all. And obviously if they've made proper reparations for that, and I feel like both of those artists have. And just to add on to that, it seems a little weird that people focus on this example of sexism when they don't do the same for Nickelback, or for Eminem, or for Pharrell, who was involved in one of the songs that fully embodied rape culture and did so proudly. Those artists don't really have the same kind of stigma following them, and unlike Taylor Swift in most cases, it's more than just one song that they've written that has been sexist. It's really odd that people focus on this one woman that had a sexist line in a song one time and kind of ignore all the other people whose entire discographies are just littered with sexism. It seems like the problem isn't with sexism, it's with the woman. To summarize this, Taylor Swift released a song with a sexist lyric, which is bad. That's a bad thing to do. But it's being held on to still years and years later, despite obvious growth and change from that mindset. Basically, the story is her boyfriend broke up with her. She wrote a song with a pretty awful lyric in it, and the media capitalized on a feud between women. Speaking of feuds between women, part 2, the female feuds. So as I was scrolling through all these celebrity timelines, I found this feud between Nicki Minaj and Taylor Swift that I'd almost completely forgotten about. This is the one about Anaconda. So if you don't remember, it was all about an awards show. I think it was for a music video award. It doesn't really matter what the awards were. The fact is that a bunch of people were sort of nominated for the award, and Nicki Minaj noticed that none of them were black people. She basically kind of kicked up a bit of a fuss about Anaconda being ignored and saying that it was because of racism, which, fair enough, it probably was. The tweet that she posted was taken the wrong way by Taylor Swift, who kind of thought that she was coming at her, and Taylor was like, yo, there's enough space for all of us women, it was probably a man that took it from you. And yeah, it was tone deaf and it wasn't really the best way to handle the situation, and it was a bit maybe self-centered, but the media ran with this and blew it up to be so much bigger than it was. The whole thing only lasted 2 days. Literally 2 days. A rundown of what happened: Nicki Minaj tweeted something about not getting awards because of racism. Taylor Swift thought that she was being attacked or singled out and retaliated. She realized what was going on, apologized, and they made up and everything was fine. The whole thing was over within 2 days. It wasn't even like a feud, it was just, oh, a bit of misunderstanding. But because it was 2 women that were involved, the media kind of blew it up and said, this is the biggest thing that's happening right now. Nicki Minaj hates Taylor Swift because women can't be friends, I guess. This is such a non-issue, and yet in all of the things that I've kind of looked up, it still gets brought up as an example of Taylor Swift being the worst. It's a misunderstanding. The two are fine now. I just don't understand why this is something that you need to hold against a person. You're really clutching at straws if you've got to pick up a 2-day misunderstanding on Twitter as a reason for someone being a bad person. And now on to the biggest feud that Taylor Swift has had with a woman, Katy Perry. I was not aware that this was going on at all. I didn't realize that Taylor Swift and Katy Perry had beef. I listen to her music, I just don't pay attention to who she doesn't like. But the media sure as hell does pay attention. It was really weird looking back at these timelines and seeing what happened. There was this website that I found that had literally every single public interaction they'd had for 10 years in chronological order. I don't know why that exists. I'm glad it did for this video, but also, why does it exist? Why? Anyway, long story short, at one point Taylor Swift was doing a tour and she had some dancers on that tour. Katy Perry wanted dancers for her big tour, and so she went to those dancers that were on Taylor Swift's tour and said, hey, come dance for me again because I'm going on tour. And those dancers said, yeah, do you know what? We'll go with Katy and we'll do a dance with her, so dancing with Taylor Swift. And that was it. That was the start of this war. How dare Katy Perry steal Taylor Swift's dancers? She got so mad. And, you know, fair enough. If my friend booked dancers out from under my nose, I guess I'd be a little annoyed. I don't think either of them did wrong in that situation. I think it might have been a bit thoughtless to take those dancers, and it might have been a bit sort of selfish to be so hurt by it. But I don't think any of them are wrong or bad. Then a lot of stuff happens, and I don't know how much of this is just the media sort of bigging things up, you know, pitting women against each other, and how much of it is just actual sort of friction between them. But there are comments here and there, and they seem to not be hanging out at big sort of public events. But then Bad Blood comes out, and everyone says that it's about Katy Perry. Selena Gomez is basically playing Katy Perry because she's got the same haircut and she's screwing over Taylor Swift, and the whole song is about how much you hate a friend that isn't your friend anymore. And then Katy Perry releases a song that's maybe about Taylor Swift as well, and the media loves that. They're like, yeah, 2 women fighting, don't we love it when they're catty? Ah! And that lasts for a while. But then recently they made up. Katy Perry sent Taylor Swift a card that was like, I'm sorry, I want to be friends, and Taylor Swift had Katy Perry in her music video. Katy Perry actually recently said something along the lines of the media blowing up a lot of things because they like to see women fighting each other. This whole feud, well, it was kind of happening in that they didn't like each other. The media definitely jumped on it, and hating a woman for not liking another woman is weird and sexist, and kind of getting enjoyment out of seeing these 2 women not be friends with each other is again just weird and sexist. I don't know why this is a whole thing that people are so obsessed with, but it's not that big a deal. They fell out and now they're fine. What's interesting is that this falling out got a lot of attention in the media, where Justin Bieber and Ed Sheeran didn't. 2 massive artists fell out with each other and no one really cares because they're men, and it's not interesting when men fall out, it's only interesting when women do it. So, it's just sexism. There's nothing here. It's like the Scooby-Doo thing. You know, you take off the mask,
Well, if it isn't our old friend.
Sexism. It's old man sexism at it again. It would have got away with it too, if it weren't for us meddling kids. That's it for feuds with women, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the biggest feud between two modern artists. Maybe I don't pay enough attention to know, let's just say that it is. Part 3? Kanye. I think everyone knows about the stuff that happened between Kanye West and Taylor Swift. And I say the stuff that happened between Kanye West and Taylor Swift. What I should really say is the stuff that Kanye West did to Taylor Swift. Because when I went to look at these sort of timelines, I didn't actually see much that she did to retaliate. She was mostly on the kind of receiving end of this guy just being a massive jerk to her. Just really rude for no discernible reason. So when Taylor Swift was a teenager and had her first big win at the VMAs, she was just rising to fame, she went on to accept the award, and then Kanye West comes out and says, yeah, but Beyonce was better though. That's not the time to do that at all. That's just rude and mean, and she was literally a teenager. Imagine being a teenager winning a massive award for, like, you know, the first time in your life, and it's amazing, it's great, and then a guy comes up and says, yo, you shouldn't have won. Anyway, I'm out. That's awful. That's an awful thing to happen to anyone. And you know, the crowd booing and thinking that they're actually booing at you when they're booing at Kanye. It's a horrible experience. And that's a horrible thing to do to someone. And from that point on, that followed her for years. So many people kept on talking about that. I mean, even the interviews afterwards, you know, when you should be being interviewed about your big win, you're actually being interviewed about the guy that came on stage and crashed it. That was a horrible thing to do. If you look at it, she didn't really say anything bad about Kanye, even in the interviews directly afterwards. And if that was me, I would not have had that kind of chill. I would have been talking about him forever. I would not forgive that. But she did. She didn't really, you know, speak out about him in any really negative way, which she had absolutely every right to do. Anyway, this whole thing became a meme and it followed her around for ages, and it's just a really not nice thing to happen to someone, isn't it? You can understand there being some friction between Kanye and Taylor after he ruined the biggest moment of her life at that point. And I wish it ended there. I really wish it did, but literally 7 years later, Kanye West decides to do something else, just mean and rude, and also his wife gets involved now. Isn't that great? In 2016, Kanye West releases a song called Famous that has the line, I think me and Taylor might still have sex. Why? I made that famous. And Taylor Swift, understandably, gets really annoyed about being called goes to Twitter and is like, yo, this is horrible. Why would you do that? But then Kim Kardashian heads to Snapchat with a video of a phone call between Taylor Swift and Kanye West where Taylor Swift agrees that Kanye West can release that song about her. Which is, you know, really snaky of Taylor Swift to say okay on the phone and then to publicly say that Kanye did it without her permission. What a horrible, awful person she is, right? Yeah, no, that's not actually what happened at all. The video that Kim Kardashian released wasn't the full video. And in the full video, you actually hear that Kanye West didn't get her permission to call her that in the song. Her management came out and said, Kanye West and Taylor only spoke once on the phone while she's on vacation with her family in January of 2016, and they have never spoken since. Taylor has never denied that a conversation took place. It was on that phone call that Kanye West also asked her to release the song on her Twitter account, to which she declined to do. Kanye and Kim here knew what was going on, and went ahead and just lied to make her look bad, and everyone jumped on it and started calling her a snake. And that's not even mentioning the fact that in the music video, Kanye West had a full Taylor Swift lookalike doll naked in it, which is just disgusting and weird. Why would you do that without someone's permission? Why would you take their likeness, put it on a naked body, and then release that to the world? That is just like a step below revenge porn, isn't it? Why would you do that to someone? So basically what happened here is that Kanye West released a song that called Taylor Swift, which he said, hey, I don't like that. And he said, you agreed to it. And then she said, no, I didn't. Then Kim Kardashian released a doctored video that said that she did. And Taylor Swift said, I'd like to be excluded from this narrative, and spent about 3 years getting abused from people for lying about something. And then after that 3 years, released the full video, which showed, no, she actually didn't agree to that at all. And people have just been lying about her again. And that's not saying that she's absolutely perfect, or that because bad things happen to her, she can't be bad herself. What I am saying is that it's pretty obvious that people are very ready to jump on this woman for anything she might do wrong. That's kind of the rundown of what's happened with Kanye, but it's really odd to me that over the years, the media view of this hasn't been, look how awful this person is to this other person. It's, look at the drama between these two celebs. Why is it drama when one person is just being rude to the other person for no reason? People are automatically geared towards this person being a bad person. People are automatically geared towards Taylor Swift being the sort of aggressor or the bad person in each situation, which is why people were so ready to jump on her and call her a snake when that video was released. But as I've said, Taylor Swift herself is not perfect, and that brings me on to the fourth part of this video. Part 4, white feminism. Before I get properly started on this section, I want to do a quick little bonus round. I quickly want to run through this article that I found on Everyday Feminist, which wasn't very feminist. That lists all of the not very feminist things that Taylor Swift has done in 1989. Not the year, the album. The music videos of the album. Let's just get into it. So first off, they called out Shake It Off for appropriating hip-hop and objectifying black women. Now you can literally read it in the article where they say, hey, I know she's used lots of different cultures and lots of different types of dance, and she's not good at any of them, but it's really bad that she did that about black things. No, it's not. Just because someone includes hip-hop or twerking or black people in a video, it doesn't mean that it's appropriation or, you know, racist. It's just in there, along with all of the other types of dance that she's not good at. Her coming in and not being good at twerking and kind of making a joke out of it and being silly is, in isolation, probably not very good. A little bit racist, but given that the entire video is her coming in and doing all these different styles of dance terribly, I think it's fine. Shake It Off is not appropriation, it's more a celebration of all these different types of dance that this person is just not good at. That's it. You're really clutching at straws if you want to call this racist, is what I'm saying. So they've got a problem with the blank space music video. You know the song that's a comment on how the media views Taylor Swift? Yeah, that one. They say that it promotes or normalizes abusive relationships because there's a character in it that is abusive towards her partners, but I don't think anyone's watching the blank space music video and thinking, oh boy, I really want to be like Taylor Swift in that relationship. No, the entire point is that the character is crazy. It's a comment on how the media views her. How can you miss this? This is probably one of the most basic things when it comes to critiquing and understanding media. Simply showing a thing is not endorsement of that thing. So now it comes to style, and they've got a real problem with style, but that's only because they couldn't find a problem with style, so they decided to make a comment on how all of the love interests are cis white men. Okay? So I guess Taylor Swift is into cis white guys. What's the problem with that? It's not really an issue for the love interests in your music videos to be white guys when otherwise they're fairly diverse. It's not like the only people in the music videos are white guys. It's just when you've got one that's got a love interest, you use a white guy. If the song is about a white guy, it makes sense that you can use a white guy in the thing. I don't think that's instantly a bad thing. I don't think that's a racist thing to do. That would be a totally different story if it was only ever white people in these music videos, but that's not the case, so it's really a non-issue. And also, it's something that so many other artists do that it just seems odd to pick on this one artist for doing it. It doesn't make her any more racist or less feminist than anyone else because there are cis white guys as love interests in her music videos. And that's kind of the point. People will pick at anything they can because they want to find something wrong. Last one is my favorite one. They've got a problem with Bad Blood because it doesn't have enough people of color in it. But if you exclude Kendrick Lamar, a quarter of the featured women in it are not white. It's a quarter of them. It could be better, but it could be a lot worse. It seems like an odd thing to pick up on when it's just a music video about a lot of women just, you know, doing cool stuff. My point is that acting like someone's made absolutely no effort to include people of color when there are people of color present and they have their own agency, it seems a little weird. What I'm saying here isn't that she deserves praise for the number of people of color that she included. I'm just saying that she doesn't deserve to be sort of, I guess, degraded. You don't need to say you did bad thing. You could just say, hey, you could do better next time. Maybe include more. It doesn't always need to be good or bad. People don't need to be sort of split into groups of bad person, good person. Sometimes people can just do things that are just fine. It's just fine. You could be better, but it's fine. I think this is a case where it's fine. So on to the main part of this section, and I think these are probably the strongest criticisms that you can actually make against Taylor Swift. Now, she didn't really talk politics until 2018, at which point she came out clearly and said, I always have and always will cast my vote based on which candidate will protect and fight for the human rights I believe we all deserve in this country. I believe the fight for LGBTQ rights and that any form of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender is wrong. I believe that the systemic racism we still see in this country towards people of color is terrifying, sickening, and prevalent. She came out and said that. That's fair enough. Now, that's a pretty good statement, I think. If it's not backed by further action, then it's a bit pointless, but it kind of does show that she is thinking about things outside of that sort of white feminist spectrum. She's kind of understanding of things like intersectionality to some degree. Again, if it's not backed by any action, then fair enough, white feminist, absolutely, but at least here there's kind of an inkling of the mindset of not being a white feminist. She also said, I cannot vote for someone who will not be willing to fight for dignity for all Americans, no matter their skin color, gender, or who they love. So I think those statements are pretty good, and statements don't mean a lot, but they do show that you're thinking enough to make those statements. Again, as I've said, you do need to back those up with action, and luckily, Taylor Swift has kind of done quite a bit outside of just making those statements. So in terms of statements and actions, why wasn't there anything before 2018? Probably, I think one of the biggest reasons is because of the Dixie Chicks. They spoke out against George Bush, and their careers basically tanked after that, and I guess Taylor Swift didn't want the same thing happening to her. On top of that, she also said that she didn't really feel that she knew enough about politics to speak up on it, which is fair enough. You want to be educated before you start talking to such a massive group of people. When you've got a huge amount of influence, you need to use that wisely, and you need to make sure that you're using it safely. You can't just spout about things that you don't really know very much about. Granted, I don't think that's a great defense. There's also the fact that after the Kanye West thing in 2016, that people were calling her a snake, and she had a pretty bad public image for a while, and she didn't want to necessarily sully the people that she stood up for by being associated with them, which I guess is fair enough. Look, all of these kinds of reasons are not great. I still think she should have probably spoken about things beforehand, but she didn't. And that's not great, but it's also not a terrible thing. All of these explanations make sense, and I can understand being irritated that someone didn't speak up sooner. But now that she is speaking up, she is doing a fair amount of stuff, and I can kind of understand not wanting to before. If someone remained silent for a long time because they were worried about backlash or worried about not knowing enough about a topic to talk about it, it doesn't really make sense to give them backlash and to harass them when they do start being vocal about things that do matter. There's no denying that Taylor Swift does talk about things that are important, and she does support important causes like, LGBT rights, and she supported Black Lives Matter. There's no doubt that she's done that. It's just odd that people attack her for the method in which she does it. So just to summarize that, up until 2018, she stayed pretty much silent on political issues, which I don't really agree with at all. I think she should have been speaking out about things much sooner, but I also don't think it makes sense to hound someone and hold on to them being silent when they're being so vocal now. It doesn't really do anything, it doesn't move anything forward, it's just hanging on to the past to be spiteful. But since then, she's done a fair amount. She's donated over $100,000 to advocacy groups, and a big thing was her You Need to Calm Down music video. It had a bunch of LGBTQ activists and stars in it, and it did a lot for the LGBTQ community. A lot of times when people capitalize on pride, they just use the LGBTQ community for money and then leave and don't actually do anything for the community itself. But the You Need to Calm Down music video included LGBT people in it. She donated a bunch of money to GLAAD, and also at the end of it, she had a petition that she started that gained over 700,000 signatures. Now that petition was about a law that was going to be passed that directly affected the LGBTQ community. So you can't really say that it was just a throwaway thing to do. It had an actual effect, and there was actual intent behind that that makes sense. It's more than just capitalizing on pride and painting rainbows on things to make money. Now, people will probably say that she's a multimillionaire and she could be donating more, and I agree, yeah, she's a multimillionaire. She probably should be donating more. But I don't think it makes sense to have a go at the people that are on your side and are actually helping when there were lots of multimillionaires that just aren't donating at all. Why spend your energy on being negative to people that are helping but you don't think are doing enough when you could spend that energy on people who aren't doing anything at all, or better yet, spend that energy to be positive and encourage people who are helping to do more and do better. You don't need to be negative to get people to be better. You can be positive and still tell people that they need to do better and do more. That's totally possible. When Black Lives Matter came about, she spoke about it, she gave out links, she encouraged people to vote, and she gave an undisclosed amount to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Now, the fact is that she didn't disclose how much she gave, so there's not much comment that anyone can make on that, but I do think it's probably better when celebrities don't disclose how much they give, because one, it stops this petty discourse on how much money did you give, and two, it shows that they're probably not doing it to make themselves look really, really good for giving a huge amount of money. Now, with Black Lives Matter, she could have done it sooner, and with the whole political sphere, yeah, she could have done it a lot sooner, but I don't think it makes sense to sort of attack or harass or degrade people for doing things just because you think they should have been doing them earlier. I said this in a video before, if someone is on your side, they're on your side. Encourage them positively rather than tearing them down for not being good enough. That's not what we should be doing. We should be focusing on positive change and positive action rather than finding the people that aren't doing as much as we think they should be doing. Now, this defense is not to say that she's perfect or that every mistake should be ignored. I just don't understand why, when we don't think someone's activism is absolutely as good as it could be, we turn to negativity, particularly with women in this case. I just don't understand why that's something that we do. Surely it makes more sense to be positive and encouraging rather than saying, look at how bad this person is because they're not even doing their job as an activist well enough. It just doesn't add up to me. This is the thing, celebrities aren't activists. They've got a lot of influence and a big following, and they should use that for good, but they're not inherently activists. That isn't really their job. That's not what they're trained to do. That's not what their experience is. So expecting celebrities to be sort of perfect activists just doesn't make sense. Now, I wouldn't call myself a celebrity at all, but the fact that you're watching this video kind of shows that I've got an influence over maybe a greater number of people than most other people generally do. That means that I've got a responsibility to use that influence for social good, but that doesn't mean that I'm an activist. I wouldn't call myself an activist at all, really. That's just not what I do. Activism isn't really my main focus. It's something that I think is important, using a following for good, but it doesn't make you an activist. Now, that's not me saying that people that have a following aren't obligated to use that for some kind of social good. Absolutely not. I'm just saying that if you follow someone, you shouldn't expect to be following an activist when that's not what they are. And that's the thing. I fully disagree with Taylor's decision to stay quiet for so long, but I can kind of understand it. I have seen friends that haven't spoken about situations quickly enough and have actually been harassed for it, and have people say horrible things and send them awful messages because they haven't spoken up on a topic soon enough. Unless you've got some kind of following somewhere, you probably don't really notice this, but there's a huge amount of pressure to say the absolute right thing as soon as a situation arises. That is a lot of pressure, and sometimes the easiest way to deal with that is just to not say anything at all. And again, that's not something that I agree with. I don't think the actual solution to that is to stay quiet. I guess my point here is that we shouldn't expect celebrities to be perfect activists. If they're doing good, that is good. I don't think we should really be negative or calling people out unless they're actually doing or saying something that is fairly harmful, or associating with someone that is causing harm to others. I don't think that it makes sense to constantly have articles about how terrible someone is when really all they're doing is just not being a good enough activist. Like, they're being a pretty good activist, a decent activist, but just not good enough. It doesn't make sense to me to have negativity when positive encouragement would work so much better. I don't think Taylor's doing a terrifically bad job, and I don't think a myriad articles critiquing every single step forward she makes is constructive. Critiquing people is important, and holding people accountable is important too, but I don't think it makes sense to be constantly hounding someone that is trying and succeeding in making positive change in the world. It's just backwards to me. The overwhelming opinion and goal of people whenever Taylor Swift does anything is to find the flaws in it and tear her down for it. That's just what I've seen in reading all of these articles. That seems to be the main goal of most people whenever she does something, to find the flaws and say, you're not good enough, you're actually a terrible person and a pretty terrible feminist. There is no need to tear someone down and call them awful because they're not meeting your expectations for an activist. Unless someone is actually doing something harmful, then there's no need to be negative to them about it. I'm not saying she should be immune from critique, I'm just saying maybe we should consider why we as a society always want to find the flaws in a woman who is doing a pretty good job of growing and learning. What is the reason that we always want to find flaws in this person? Could it be because she's a woman? I don't know. Maybe it's that. Critique doesn't need to be negative, but when it comes to Taylor Swift, it almost invariably is. I can't really find many articles that are saying, hey, she's done a good job, but this is what she could be doing better. It's always, she's so terrible, she did this, when actually, she should have been doing this thing up here. I've already said before in this video and on my channel that it doesn't make sense to attack or harass or be overly negative to someone just because they don't meet your expectations for activism. You can say you want or expect more, but undermining what good someone has actually done just seems mad. Part 5. Conclusion. So because this video has been framed as a defense of Taylor Swift, it might seem that I'm sweeping some bad things under the rug. That's really not my intention at all. I kind of have pointed out, I think, where she's done things wrong, where she's done things that I don't agree with. The lyrics in 2010, not speaking up on politics till 2018. I do think those things are bad, and I'm not saying that they're good at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it seems odd that they're being held against someone now when the same standards aren't set for other people. It might have been more obvious as this video went on, but most of the problems that people have had with Taylor Swift find their roots in sexism. You can almost see people scrambling to find a reason to hate her after we all decided as a society that it's probably not okay to bash women for the number of men that they date. Now, I'm not saying that you need to like her as an artist or a person, or that you can't expect her to do more as an activist, and I'm not saying that she's an unproblematic queen that can do no wrong. That kind of idolization is unhealthy and no one can live up to those expectations. But what I am saying is when you've got an instinctive feeling of dislike, hatred, or negativity towards a female celebrity, maybe stop and consider where that's actually coming from. All of us have grown up in a society where sexism is the norm, and there's a lot of things that all of us need to unlearn, things that we might not be aware of. And I'm not saying that this person is absolutely perfect or this person has done no wrong. I'm just saying that the kind of media attention that Taylor Swift gets and the kind of reaction she gets from the public, I think it is heavily tainted by sexism, and that's something that we should probably address. This video was about Taylor Swift, but this situation isn't unique to Taylor Swift. I chose her because I thought she was a decent example. The fact is that pretty much every female celebrity experiences this to varying degrees. The fact is that women in the media get an awful amount of negative attention that men just don't get. Famous women are generally held to different standards and treated horribly differently to men by the public and by the media. We're all kind of complicit in this. Just to reiterate, my point isn't that Taylor Swift and all these other women are perfect. Usually when we hate them, we can hate them for XYZ reason, but when we actually look into what those reasons are, we find that they're not really worth hating someone for necessarily. Like, sure, you can dislike them. This intense sort of hatred that we feel towards women celebrities is just kind of a product of this hatred that society seems to hold for women. There's this kind of contempt that people can hold for women purely because they're women and successful, or the fact that they don't necessarily conform to what we think a woman should conform to. And you can definitely see it in the way that people treat female celebrities. But that is my video on Taylor Swift. If you like Taylor Swift, let me know in the comments. If you don't like Taylor Swift, also let me know in the comments. Just tell me what you think of her. Tell me if there's anything I've missed, because to be honest, there could have been. If you like this and you want to see more deep dives into stuff, just let me know in the comments again. If you haven't already, hit the like button. If it gets to 10 likes, I'll make another video. Don't let this flop. Get it to 10 likes. If you want to see me elsewhere, go check out my podcast, Sigh Guys. We have new episodes every single week and new live shows every 2 weeks. But between the videos and podcasts, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. If you're not following me on there, go do that. It's a lot of fun. You're missing out if you're not. I'll see you there. I have nothing else to plug, so I'll see you at some point after now.